So what do you get when you mix limited comic book knowledge, the fueling fires of a few failures, and the efforts of an entire creative team in a very short amount of time? Well, you get X-Men the Animated Series. More on that right after this killer track.
Let's go back in time, we can just hit rewind. What a terrific notion, it's cartoon commotion.
Hiya, homies and friendos! I'm Cade, your favorite cartoon weirdo, reminding you that the mutants are our friends. The good ones, anyways. The bad ones are total Zods. Oh, and of course, we cannot forget my ultra-talented banjo-playing pig co-host, Jiggy. Together, we rewind to the tunes of the 80s and 90s for a brand new perspective in your life nowadays. If you're hanging out with us in the podcast version of our show, then you should know that Jiggy and I stream live 2 times a month on Facebook and YouTube, so you gotta be over there to keep up with the commotion. Of course, if you subscribe to us on a podcast platform, that'd be totally awesome also. And real quick, just to let everyone know, we are brought to you by the fine folks of the Cereal Box Network. They have a Saturday morning show where they every week take you back to the Saturdays of your youth, and occasionally we join them for cartoon conversations also. That's Cereal Box Podcast, Back of the Cereal Box. Joining us in this episode is a good friend and mentor of mine, the fantastic TV cartoon historian who wrote the book on the tunes of the best Saturdays of our lives and leads a podcast of the same name, Mark McCray. Hiya, Mark!
Hi, how you doing, Cade? What's new and exciting?
Live and animated as usual.
That's great. Thanks so much for having me on the show.
So glad to have you with us here, because you're going to add an amazing layer of experience to this podcast. I mean, the whole thing here is the industry, like the background and how X-Men defied expectations set by executives and all those guys. So we got a lot to cover. It's radical to have you here, as always, Mark. So glad that you could join us. Yo, friendos, if you're here live in the chat, we have a live chat. So let's check in with our friends in that chat right now. We've got Callie is here. Hey there. Hiya, Cartoon Commotion for Sherry Edgin says, Cartoon Commotion group. Sherry's in the house. My house, that is. Love you, Jiggy. Go, Jiggy, go, Jiggy. Callie says, I was here first. It's not a contest, guys. George Bueller from Fanatic Forum says, howdy, folks, and welcome, Mark. You, Mark.
Yeah. Thanks.
Galaxy Unicorn Art says, hi, Cade, and hi, Mark. And she's waving hands, and she's got a pink waving, I don't know what that is. The emojis don't show on our ends, guys. So, Toy Stalker is here from toystalker.com. How goes it, guys? It's great. As I said, live and animated. Sherry Edgen says, hi, George. All right, they're going to get reacquainted in the chat while we get going here. So, we'll come back to that chat in a little bit. So get your comments in there, and let's crank this show up to 11:07. But first, before we do a breakdown, now might be a good time to mention, Mark, that our swag shop, we got a brand new T-shirt design called Saturday Vibes. This shirt is $25 print on demand from Teespring, and we'll have a link to that in the description or wherever you are right now. If you'd like to snag that up, that is. CartoonCommotion.com. You could also go there. It's going to be in the merch and swag section towards the bottom of the page. The text features letters from the logos of multiple cartoons such as Transformers, DuckTales, Alvin and the Chipmunks, Ghostbusters, Thundercats, and a few more. It's designed to take you back to those Saturday vibes that you had when Saturday mornings were a wondrous event. So snag up your shirt whenever you get the chance. It's another way to support the show if you can't be a monthly supporter or a one-time donator on our Buy Me a Coffee, Buy Me a Cookie page. Okie doke. Now to get things going with the breakdown. X-Men the Animated Series had 76 episodes and a total of 5 seasons, premiering on October 31st in that year of 1992, keeping the airwaves nice and mutated on Fox Kids until September 20th of 1997. The stars of the show are the main team, Professor X, the one who brought them all together. His telepathic abilities are practically unmatched. Wolverine, who has a quick healing factor and razor-sharp adamantium claws. Cyclops has an optic beam and usually an ever-on-the-job leader of the team. Beast, who's actually a poetic and intelligent hero. Gambit, who can throw explosively charged held objects, and he's an incredible bow staff fighter. Jean Grey, second telepath to Professor X, she can also fly and has even more power with untapped potential that's discovered as the series progresses. And finally, Jubilee with her sparkling firework-style exploding bursts. Jubilee is basically our introductory window to the characters, our eyes and ears to the ways that we are supposed to see this series. Most average people of their world hate mutants, even for no reason at all except, of course, fear. Because people often fear things that they don't understand, and hate is easier than understanding. This, of course, is in relation to being different, which is what Margaret thought would be a key part of selling the show in the first place, but surprisingly, even that was hard to sell to a network. We'll get to Margaret in a little while. Now, with the aid of Mark McCray, the living masterclass of Saturday morning cartoons, we are going to uncover the ways that X-Men the Animated Series defied all expectations. 1 second here. Friends, prepare yourselves because this is our main topic. How X-Men became a pop culture juggernaut. Pun intended, of course. Mark,
Right.
for this retrospective convo, I think that we should focus on the development of X-Men, the struggle of getting it on TV. This is where the expectations were most exceeded, and we can examine how exactly they were. I know that your book touches a lot on X-Men during its airtime in the 90s. Let's start with that, and then compare your thoughts then to now. And then we'll toss in a little bit of Eric's book that I think you'll find interesting. Okay, so the first time you really get into X-Men the Animated Series is in your commentary on Chapter 13. This was commentary on your newsletter from 1994, 2 years into the series' existence. In that text, you explained that not only was X-Men Fox Kids' #1 show, but it brought them up to first place in the race of Saturday morning cartoons. So could you expand on that? How did you feel about the cartoon when it first premiered in 1992?
Yeah, well, I was super excited about the X-Men series premiering. I was an X-Men fan. I read the comic books, and along with Batman the Animated Series, these were the two shows to watch in 1992. And the first couple of episodes premiered, and I was super excited. And then those 2 episodes repeated, and I'm like, okay, what's going on here? So I was just being very patient. But in terms of the character design and the background music and the story, I was pulled in right away. And I felt like, just after watching 2 episodes, that the series definitely did meet my expectations. And I was excited for Fox Kids too, because they were the new kids on the block. And I feel like Fox Kids made ABC and CBS step up their game a bit, because they were the new kids on the block. So it was exciting times.
Yeah, sort of like a new challenger has arrived. Beware, step up your game.
Right, exactly. And it was good timing for Fox Television as well, because it was one of those situations where NBC had dropped out of the Saturday morning race in 1992. And so it sort of created a power vacuum amongst the 3 networks. But fortunately, Fox came in and kind of shored up that power dynamic. And entered into the Saturday morning marketplace at the right time. I
So
think it might have been a little harder for them if NBC still had a Saturday morning schedule, but
okay,
they were
okay.
gone.
Well, so expand on that. Like it premiered on Fox Kids. It did the first episode twice.
Yeah, so like I said, I was watching in real time. So one of the things that I excluded from the book was that they repeated the first two episodes. Then and then I think one of the Saturdays it was preempted altogether. And then right around Thanksgiving holiday, they premiered the third episode. And in
So,
my original newsletter, I actually, I was
well, that would be the second episode, though, right?
no. I'm sorry. There were two episodes that premiered back. There were two episodes.
Oh, so they did Night of the Sentinels twice.
They did. Okay, okay. So episode
Night
one.
of the Sentinels is the it's basically the pilot, and it's
Right.
a two-part pilot.
Okay,
so-
I'm sorry. Yeah.
so
So
the
yeah. So
premiere-
they did that twice. They
Okay.
did that. They aired that twice, and then the third episode hit around Thanksgiving weekend, or the second episode, I guess.
Okay.
I'm thinking when I'm counting episodes 1, 2, and 3, I'm thinking that the hour premiere episode, when they reran it, they split it into half hours.
Okay.
So
All right, that makes
so-
more sense.
yeah, so that's what I mean when I say what was 1, 2, and 3.
Well, the way that this cartoon premiered or aired its episodes, I should say, it's very strange because the network wanted one thing, but their writing was another thing. There was an episode later on, I think it's like I don't want to get my numbers wrong, but Juggernaut had attacked the X Mansion, and that premiered after an episode where that had already happened.
Right.
So, and it was just because of production, like how they were able to get it produced in a timely fashion. We'll get into that in a little bit though, because there's more to go over in the terms of production. Right on. So one of the things I love about your book and newsletters is that you can relive how it felt in that moment as you were watching and experience it on the cartoon on TV. I think that's fantastic, and we will go over more of your book in a little while. Really, we need to talk about the raw emotion that this cartoon was boasting, the relationships of... Oh, what's up, Jiggy? You don't like that direction? Well, what did you have in mind? Oh, yeah, okay, that's a bit off track, Jiggy, but you're right. Margaret Lesh was the driving force of this whole thing, so it's smart thinking, Jiggy. We should start with her. So here's a picture of Margaret. This is Margaret Lesh. Jiggy and I have been going through both your book, Mark, and Eric Lewald's book previously on X-Men at the same time, and we've been learning so much. It's mondo incredible, all that was going on behind the scenes to make this work of art a reality. So let's rewind and discuss. Okay, so according to Eric's first book, as I just mentioned previously on X-Men, X-Men in animated form was something that Margaret Lesh was trying to make a thing since the early 80s when Stan Lee was still making a huge campaign to get Marvel in animation. That was Stan's vision for Marvel, animation, TV, movies, and she, through him, discovered the mutant team. From that moment on, she knew that this would be great television, and that became her vision. So she kind of adapted his vision, and it became her vision after she discovered the X-Men. It's so whack how the best ideas can just sit around collecting dust like they're not worth anything. But really, that's just executives not seeing their true value. With people investing real-world money in people's concepts, practically everything is a gamble. So, actually, I wanted to get your take on that, Mark. Because you've been in the industry. Have you encountered pitches for shows? Have you encountered, do you know how that process works?
Yeah, well, back in the day, especially those early Saturday morning days, sometimes, shows could be pitched to all three networks. But what I found was that depending on who you pitch to, depending on who that executive is, sometimes can make a big difference. Fred Silverman, of course, one of the greatest programmers of all time, the man with the golden gut. He knew right away what he wanted, and it was either a yes or a no, and it was really quickly. And you never heard stories about Fred Silverman turning down a show that actually went to a rival network because he dropped the ball on something. And so a lot of times it really depends on that executive, what type of vision they have, and what they want for the network. Margaret Lesh was one of these people that I feel was a programming trend caster, because she can look 6 months or a year into the future and know what kids want to see. And a lot of programmers don't have that type of programming instinct or programming gut, where they could just see something, the potential of a series, and know that it's going to be a hit. And to be perfectly honest, the executives growing up that were at CBS and ABC had more of that trend casting type of ability than, say, executives that were working at NBC for a while.
Yeah, so like everyone she was pitching to didn't really get the whole picture that she saw, the future, the potential of the X-Men.
Exactly. And you know, like a show like Fat Albert and the Cosby Kids originally was turned down by all the networks, but then Fred Silverman decided to take it because it filled a pro-social educational checkbox for the network. And, you know, it was put later in the schedule because, you know, in the 70s, a lot of the schedules started, you know, a lot of the networks started getting scrutinized by, you know, parents groups, and Action for Children's Television, which I always say is the enemy of Saturday morning and censorship. But
they basically were the bad guys.
yeah. However, you know, they were the ones that, you know, kind of helped the networks make other choices.
Yeah, that's true. We did get some like diversity from what the cartoons were, like, because this brought, like, these shows brought superheroes back to TV, and we're getting ahead of ourselves there, but this brought superheroes back to TV like the right way.
Yes.
But previously, their restrictions kind of helped make things like Scooby-Doo.
Oh my gosh! Right? Yeah. So you know, there was this, you know, my new book that's coming up. I'm going to talk about a lot of this. You know, there's sort of like a dividing line. So 1967 was like the most violent Saturday morning schedule. You had DC versus Marvel for the first time on Saturday morning, and all of the studios are trying to one up each other in terms of pushing the content levels. And you know, some villains didn't make it out of the episode alive, and so there was this outcry of, you know, so much violence on television. So a lot of religious groups, a lot of grassroots groups like Action for Children's Television decided, you know, there's too much violence on TV. Plus the Vietnam War was raging, and that was being shown on the 6 o'clock news every night. And so after 1967, the 1968-69 season, that's the last year you're going to see, you know, a brand new superhero shows on the air, because NBC actually bought up all the contracts for their superhero series, but competitive Fred Silverman over on CBS was like, oh no, I'm going to make my new Batman Superman hour, and, you know, parents groups, religious groups, whatever, they're just going to have to deal with it. But by 1970 was the first year that you didn't see any greenlit or new superhero shows on the air. But the networks and the writers was still trying to kind of sneak in subversive and little things to you know, try to get around the censorship. But that was the start. But it took all the power away from writers trying to make a superhero show. And you don't see superheroes actually come back until 1972, where you have Superman and Wonder Woman guest appearing on the Brady Kids show. It was the last year that Filmation had the Superman contract, and they decided to give Superman sort of a farewell. And then Batman and Robin show up on the new Scooby-Doo movies the same year in 1972. And then the following year, the Super Friends happened. And that's because the Batman and Robin episodes on the new Scooby-Doo movies and the Superman Wonder Woman episodes on the Brady Kids were the highest rated episodes. So that was an indicator to the networks that kids still wanted to see superheroes. Unfortunately, when those superheroes came back, they were not allowed to throw punches.
Wow. There's so much information in that alone, and does anyone ever refer to you as like a walking cartoon encyclopedia? Because you are just brimming, like it's just coming to the brim. The surface of your very being just emanates cartoon history.
Yeah, they used to call me that at Cartoon Network, actually, when I first started working there. Yeah. So I used to send my newsletter to Cartoon Network when they first started, before I was even working there.
Right.
And I found out later that they used to send my newsletter around to various departments for people to read, because my newsletter was an education for people for new hires, for people who were just starting at the network that wanted to get some type of programming insight to what Saturday morning was like. And, you know, Cartoon Network had all the old Hanna-Barbera shows and libraries, as well as the Looney Tunes and MGM libraries. But I didn't find that out until I was working at the company for about 4 or 5 years, when one of my coworkers, you know, came and introduced herself to me. And she says, you know, when I was first hired, your newsletter was put on the distribution list like a magazine to be sent to various departments for people to read. And I thought that was so
epic.
Cool.
That is so rad. I mean,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, it's just like you wrote that, and it's just in circulation. That's awesome.
Right.
I'm just excited for you.
Yeah, and that was a Mike Lazo idea, who created Cartoon Network. So that was one of his.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. Okay, we do have to move on. We gotta get in that live chat because I'm seeing some comments coming in. Let's see who's talking here. We got Toystalker.com says that looks good. I'm thinking they're referring to the shirt, so that's cool. Saturday Vibes shirt is available in our shop. J-Man, Julian Murray's here. Hi, just got here. Hiya, Jay. And Sherry Edgen says, I remember that. You both are so knowledgeable. You are right, Mark. Fox Kids needed this win for them. Yes. I mean, I think the superhero cartoons are the reason we really love Fox, because Fox succeeded with the superhero. They're the reason that we had X-Men the animated series and Batman the animated series, and we'll get into that in a little while. So Callie Hawkins says, hey Julian, who was your favorite character in X-Men? Callie asks. So
Me?
my character. Okay, you go ahead and ask first. You go ahead and answer first, Mark.
I liked my favorite character. Well, it's kind of like a tie. I mean, I like Rogue because she has such an interesting backstory. You know, she originally was part of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants and a protege of Mystique. And she's the character I fell in love with. And then I guess the second character would probably be a Storm.
Okay. Like, did you connect with her, like the whole emotional situation she had going on with tight spaces and then being used, and like she had a lot of layers.
Oh yeah, I believe it was the Genosha episode where they put it's like one of my favorite. They put Storm in that box and
Slave Island.
Yeah, Slave Island, and you know, Jubilee is concerned, and Gambit says, "No, we just gotta let her be." And it's like one of my favorite moments in that episode where Storm freaking, you know, Jubilee is like, "No, Storm, you're too weak. You can't do this." And you know, Gambit is like, "You just gotta let her be." And of course, you know, she gets her payback.
Oh, she does.
And in a really big way with
sort of explosive.
Yes. And
but you're rooting for her the whole time. You're so rooting for her.
Oh yeah.
It was an unbelievable finish to that episode.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, when we come back next week for our next episode, I'm going to be bringing up the Slave Island episode, so stay tuned for that. So we're gonna be talking about that a little bit. She also says Rogue was awesome. So she's in agreement with you there. For me, I guess a favorite would probably be Wolverine. It's kind of a toss-up between Wolverine and Jean. Because Jean had this, like, emotional, like, crazy emotional arc that you wouldn't even, like, on surface level, wasn't nearly as deep as if you pay close attention. And I'm going to be talking about that in my next episode also. One thing in particular for Wolverine is just kind of his sort of troubled nature. He just sort of had a lot to deal with, this like lack of history, like things that he doesn't remember, things that he has to be reintroduced to, and it's sort of like meeting the people that turned you into a weapon. It's some deep stuff. And then he's kind of also emotionally damaged, where he'll walk off and try to like heal, emotionally speaking, and then like come back sort of like throwing a fit, like a tantrum, and then he's like, okay, you guys need me and I actually don't want to leave you, so like
right.
So those were always good. Like the first, I think it's part 2 of Night of the Sentinels. Yeah, he slices Scott's car, and then he says to Jean, tell Scott I made him a convertible.
That's awesome. Yeah, it seems like at least in the first couple of episodes, he kept saying, I go where I want to go, or I do what I want to do.
Yeah.
And,
yeah.
You know.
That was kind of like his catchphrase almost.
Mm-hmm.
Like besides the I'm the best at what I do thing.
Right.
He also frequently said, I go where I want to go.
Right.
That's actually, I do remember that voice actor's name, Cal Dodd. He's really good.
Yeah, he is actually going to be at a convention in Greenfield, South Carolina called Retro Toy Con. They have assembled some of the X-Men cast at Retro Toy Con in November. I think it's the weekend before Thanksgiving. I'm on there. I get updates from them, and I did that convention last year, actually. We talked about George Lucas's Saturday morning shows.
Oh yes, the
Ewoks
and Ewoks.
Yes, and so we're not doing that convention this year, and it would be really good. My podcast partner Dan Klink lives in Greenville, and he may go up there, may go to the convention and interview some of those actors.
Oh, that would be tight, getting an interview with Wolverine on there.
And I think Eric Lewald is supposed to be there too. So, yeah, it's going to be a good time next month.
Well, Sherry Edgen says, that's cool, Mark. You know what I liked most about the X-Men was the characters weren't fluffy and fake, and didn't Margaret put her job on the line to start X-Men? Okay, so you're getting ahead of us, Sherry, but we are going to be talking about that. Okay, so we were talking about Margaret. She was the president of Fox Kids, and she was working on the Hanna-Barbera Incredible Hulk cartoon during the time when she met Stan Lee and learned about the X-Men comic books. Okay, short tangent. Could you even imagine, Mark, how the 70s might have handled an X-Men series? Like, I mean...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it probably would have looked something like the Super Friends.
It could have.
It could have.
Like, mix maybe Super Friends with Pride of the X-Men, and... or even take them out of the Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends appearances that they made. Mm-hmm. Kind of like that. But, like... Right. There'd be a whole lot less action, honestly.
Oh, for sure. Well, this is why I give the writers and producers of Saturday morning shows, especially from the 70s and 80s, they were really challenged. Right. How do I tell a story in animation where my superheroes cannot throw a punch?
Yeah, you gotta cut them some slack.
Right. And one day I was watching a Thundar the Barbarian episode, and I got a phone call, and I muted it. I muted the TV, and so I'm on the phone and I'm watching. I'm still watching Thundar, and he's fighting like a 2-headed dragon or a 3-headed dragon or something like that. And the camera work and the action was just really amazing in that sequence. And I totally would have missed it, only because I had the audio off, that I was really able to pay attention to all the action that was going on. And so these guys were really challenged. They really had to step it up.
Yeah.
And figure out, okay, how do I make this exciting for the audience? And because a lot of them did not want to phone it in, of course. So
they had the struggle of like writing good, but also maintaining those restrictions.
Exactly. The most violent Thundar ever got in terms of hand-to-hand combat, Ukla the monk might throw somebody, in the air towards the other bad guys and everybody falls down. But that was like the most you ever saw, in terms of violence. Characters were still not allowed to throw any punches.
Okay, but getting back on track.
Yes.
we had in that tangent, and that's my fault. But I think that we can all agree today that Margaret Loesch wanted this cartoon to happen more than anybody. She knew that this was television gold, as you were saying. How she could, you said telecaster, or what was it called?
A trendcaster. I call it trendcaster. Right.
She knew that this was television gold, and the only thing keeping it from happening were those lousy executives that just didn't get it. Executives in TV had some very out there perspectives on making a good cartoon series. Their picks had to sell toys, or they just weren't a thing for the most part. Even through discouraging times, she kept on pitching the concept to networks over and over again. At one time, she was told that nobody wanted superheroes. She was actually told this by an executive, that the only people interested in comics are 18-year-old nerdy boys. Those were her... I don't know who said it, but those were the executive's exact words to her.
I've met a lot of executives that don't know what they're doing. They got lucky. Maybe they knew someone in the industry, and these are the people that, are greenlighting shows, and some of them really don't know what they're doing, unfortunately. And like I said, some people are really built to take in a pitch, and now at the end of the day, you're going by your gut. You really, you're doing your trend casting, but even in that particular instance, you're really going by your gut.
It was still a gamble.
It's still a gamble.
Still
Exactly.
That she wasn't entirely, but I mean, she was more sure than anyone.
Right, exactly.
To be fair.
So from what I understand, Margaret Loesch also knew Fred Silverman as well. And so you have people like Margaret Loesch, Fred Silverman, Brandon Tartikoff, who did mostly, nighttime television. These people really had a passion for television shows and series and movies, and they sort of knew they knew the pulse of what people wanted. And I'm glad she kept pushing, because she knew she was right in this particular instance. And whoever told her that kids didn't want to see superhero shows absolutely did not know what they were talking about.
They knew nothing. They knew diddly squat.
Exactly.
Her and Stan, they kind of were discouraged by this, and they were turned away from networks who just couldn't grasp the concept because it didn't push toys first. Its purpose was to provide high value, and I stress this because it's the key to this whole thing. Is they couldn't understand that its purpose was to provide high value drama to audiences of all ages. They couldn't see the money in that, and I'm sure you've got some insight onto that, but we've kind of already covered some of that, so we're gonna keep moving because I know you got something else to do tonight. Well,
but you warned me. You said this would happen. Once we get going.
Well, I mean, we reside in the realms of animation, Mark. So I mean, we're bound to carry on a little bit.
Yeah. I understand.
Well, eventually, Margaret got the position as president of Fox Kids, as we said earlier. She went to her boss, Jamie Kellner, and I do a horrible job of pronouncing names, but I'm hoping that I got that right. I know it's Jamie, but Kellner is kind of a little different for me. Kellner, who was the president of the entire Fox network at the time, so she went up to the top, and she pitched the series to him. And so this is something that she's worked for her whole career, basically. At this point, it's been about a decade. Her pitch was, let's be edgier and let's target boys, but not alienate girls. And to me, that's sort of like saying we're writing a high-value piece of art here. We're not writing down to kids. But she had to sell it that way, and that's really what she was doing here, right?
And that's the perfect combination, because, you know, when you look at demographics, even today, it's the most successful shows or kid shows on now have you want a 50-50 split between boys and girls. All right. Sometimes if you're too boy heavy, it's going to affect your ratings. If you're too girl heavy, it might affect your ratings as well. So a 50-50 split is like the ideal demographic to have for a Saturday morning show or a syndicated show or cable television or even streaming. That is the ideal split. And so she knew this even back in those days, that you need the boy and girl audience in order to be successful.
She wrote in Eric's book, so like she didn't actually write it, but she had a conversation and Eric wrote it down. And she said that she knew that girls were going to be interested in this series as well. It's not specifically guy-fueled or guy-charged. It had a wider demographic than that, where like both sides of the spectrum would enjoy it. And, you know, it most likely took months before she actually wore him down and he gave in to her request of making an X-Men cartoon for kids. However, Mr. Kellner straight up asked her, and this is what Sherry Edgen was coming in with. He asked her if she was willing to stake her job on this series. Her whole, you know, her bread and butter, her bringing home the bacon, all of that. She was willing to stake her job on this, even though he still couldn't understand it. She agreed to those terms and conditions. So, okay, well, can you believe that? That she had such confidence that with the right people coming together to make X-Men the way it was supposed to be, it would be enough to keep her employed, and that bet was golden because it did. How great a success story is that?
Yeah, it's a wonderful story. It's a wonderful story, and it's very inspiring, because if you have a dream and you really believe in that dream, and Margaret Lesh definitely did believe in the X-Men, it was just a culmination of blood, sweat, and tears to put that show together, and how successful everything was. And I don't know if someone actually came down, you know, like if her bosses at Fox, like, you know, said congratulations, good job, or whatever. I'm not even sure if that happened, but it should have happened, because she was right all along. But maybe they didn't do that, because it would have been a situation where, oh, told you so. I was right. But the fact that they made her put her job on the line for that, and you know, and sometimes I wonder about that too. Like if it had been a man, if it had been an executive that was a dude that had the same vision, I wonder if the same thing would have been said to that guy. Like, okay, are you willing to put your job on the line? And it just kind of makes me think sometimes that because Margaret Lesh, you know, is a woman,
right?
You know, they felt, well, yeah, well, you know, we can just you just need to put your job on the line for
like
this.
You don't really know if this is gonna work. So like,
right.
Are you willing to stake everything on it? Because if you are, then we'll do it.
Right. Right. Because I just never heard of that ever happening to a male executive ever in the industry. Now, well, maybe it has happened, you know, so that's what I'm saying, you know.
I'm not sure, because, you know, there's a lot of shows that seem to just fade off into nothing. Like you might hear of them, but you won't necessarily see them. Like, there might be, like, I got a message from John Ellis on Facebook just a little bit ago. He made a comment, I think it was actually earlier today or yesterday, and it was about a Chester Cheetah cartoon being made. and apparently there were animation like shots, or there were strips or something, and it was like at the cusp of the popularity of the character from Cheetos.
Right. Interesting.
And so things like that. I don't know who made that. I don't know, but it could be any number of creative talents out there that put this together, and then it just vanished. There's so many cartoons. I just recently covered some cartoons on here, Inhumanoids and Skeleton Warriors.
Right.
And both cartoons are just they're really good. I think Skeleton Warriors is just a hair. I like that just a hair more, for numerous reasons. I have, if you got to go back and watch those episodes, I guess. But point I'm trying to make is that those only lasted a season, and both 13 episodes, different times entirely. One was the 80s, one was the 90s. It's insane to see all these great things just kind of killed off.
Well, also back in the day too, Saturday morning networks did not have enough budget to necessarily renew everything. So if a series like Skeleton Warriors did really good ratings, it was a situation where a network executive had to decide, okay, here's my budget for new programming coming in the fall, and they had to literally pick which shows did well the previous season that was going to get an allotment of new episodes. And
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so one of the things that I always like that Filmation did, instead of like waiting for the network to figure out if they're going to get a second season pickup, Filmation started pitching a brand new show featuring those characters, and that way they got a full season pickup. And then Hanna-Barbera started doing the same thing. Like the Pebbles and Bam Bam show ran in 1971, but for the following season, they did the Flintstones Comedy Hour featuring the same characters. And so that's how a lot of times studios got around the, will they or will they not give me a second or third season pickup. Now, there are some exceptions to the rules, like the Muppet Babies. The Muppet Babies got picked up with new episodes every season because it just did great ratings, and it wasn't going. And they also were working with Jim Henson, and they wanted to be in business with Henson as well. And I don't know if anyone from the Jim Henson side was like, "What? You're only going to give me 3 new episodes for the following season?" I don't even know if that conversation happened, but like with Muppet Babies, it was every year new episodes. So,
well, that is. We're gonna have a whole nother conversation. But moving on with X-Men, of course we know that Margaret's audacity yielded colossal gains for the network. Her successful adaptation of the Marvel comic to animation triggered a monumental shift in genre evolution from 1992, as we were talking about, with the whole like superheroes not being able to throw a punch thing. I'd say that Batman had a similar impact, but it wasn't as serialized. It was more episodic. X-Men was a trailblazer with advanced thematic narratives, steering away from the episodic norm. It was reminding people what happened in the last episode with their tagline, "Previously on X-Men."
Right. I believe that was really the first animated series to do that, to have that previously on X-Men.
Yeah,
as
it's written down there. It's written down there as the first to do that, so it really is.
And I think that's pretty important because Marvel Comics, one of the things I think they had over DC back in the day, and we're going back to the 60s, was Marvel and Stan Lee. They were the kings of continuity. They could be Spider-Man can guest star in a Fantastic Four comic book, and there would be some type of continuity reference.
Yeah, and writer and director, producer Larry Houston was trying to make sure that they got a lot of those references in there.
Yeah, and Larry Houston, who I met back at PowerCon, which is all things He-Man and She-Ra, he was there, and we interviewed him for our podcast. He was a Marvel fan growing up, he read the comic books. He knew everything about these characters, and he was absolutely the right person to be working on this series. And at that convention, he was treated like a rock star. All right, like the man couldn't go take a lunch break without people stopping him on the convention floor to take pictures and selfies and everything. And we actually had to wait until the convention was over just to talk to him, because I mean, his table stayed packed and fans really wanted to talk to him and see him.
Wow. I mean, we're getting ahead of ourselves if I mention what I'm about to mention, but it's Eric Lewald's part in this whole thing, and how Larry Houston was such a help to that. But we'll get to that in just a second. Oh, of course, Jiggy. What did you want to add? Okay. Correctamundo, Jigmeister. X-Men was so much more about their characters' relationships and social struggles. When it featured individual personal growth, it was always tied into struggles around them, the characters, somehow. The characters they'd have to face might be related to them personally in some way or another. Your book, Mark, touches on the dramatic writing, and I think that's because of the relationships in the series. Am I far off?
No, you're not. And that was the draw. That's what really pulled me in. I feel like the writing really made you care about the characters, and you felt for these characters, even though they were animated characters. The storylines made you want to root for the X-Men, and you know, if there's an emotional connection between the viewer and the show, it's going to be successful, because that's the thing that I think people don't understand. You know, there's always these debates about good animation versus bad animation, and I think it's not even a debate to me. I feel like,
oh, yeah, that's right, Jiggy. Eric Lewald actually did say in his book that it was always about the relationship more than the fight. And right. I actually find that refreshing. I think that's kind of what you were trying to get into there.
Yeah.
The fight was the setting for the drama to exist within. You know,
right.
Mark, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but he's the only pig that I know that wants an X-Men history book read to him before bed.
Oh my gosh.
He's a ham with good taste for sure.
Oh, that is so funny. Oh, Jiggy.
So yeah, the emotional condition of the series was kind of like their focus, and I totally see where you're headed with that.
Right. And even you know, obviously I was an adult watching this show, so I was clearly out of the demographic. But
right on. That's awesome though, because it appealed to you right there.
Right. But I could see kids still relating to the storyline. It was relatable, and something that you said earlier about Jubilee, you know, sort of being the heart
eyes and ears, the window.
Eyes and ears. I mean, that probably helped a lot as well, because
I gotta say, I'm sorry, but on your point, I gotta say, Jubilee was so much more essential to me as a child than she is now.
Right.
Rewatching the series now, I see this sort of like disconnect with her character. It's interesting how your perspective shifts, because when I was a kid watching this and I was seeing her be introduced to all the X-Men, I thought she was so much more essential to the core of the team than she really was. And if you go back and rewatch it, it very much morphs your perception of their world.
Right. Yeah, I think one of the funniest moments, I call it one of the funniest Jubilee moments, is when they're fighting the Juggernaut.
Okay.
And she's firing, you know, her powers at him.
Sparkle beams.
Right. And he goes, "Ooh, that tickles."
Yeah.
It was so funny. It was so funny. I said,
but she was able to hit like a sentinel, and she was able to do some damage there.
Right.
It was weird how she, okay, not weird. it's the best use of her character was the introduction, because you got to see this sort of like she's becoming a mutant. She's never experienced her powers before. She's at the age where like she starts to recognize that she has these abilities, and so like you're seeing the hate of their world. You're seeing the powers coming and just becoming or manifesting, I guess, in a person, like how that would be, how they would be treated, how their families think of them. It's all just hits you right out of the gate. It just immediately.
I mean, that's it, and that is the fact that that's what makes the X-Men so relatable, because they are not perfect and they do have problems, and they are problems that I think audience members definitely could relate to. The fact that they're not being accepted, a kid watching, maybe they start thinking about, wow, maybe I got bullied, or maybe I wasn't accepted at school, or maybe someone called me a nerd or something like that. So a lot of it is all relatable. And this is the thing that Marvel always had going for their characters. Peter Parker, Spider-Man had issues. Things weren't so perfect. Whereas when you look at the world of DC, everything was bright skies and not so much. I mean, in the 70s, DC started to shift thanks to a writer named Denny O'Neil. He started to make, changes with the Batman character. He brought Batman back to his roots.
Question?
Right. But
didn't he write the question?
I'm sorry.
Didn't he write the question?
I
think he went by Dennis O'Neil, maybe.
Yeah.
I might be off here, but
yes, it's the same person, Denny or Dennis. but like DC actually had to kind of start doing things the Marvel way, because Marvel started eating DC Comics lunch every day, and so they had to sort of like change to catch up with what comic readers wanted. And I think that emotional storyline that you had going in X-Men, that was the draw. That made those characters so much more relatable.
You can connect with real human problems. And
right.
Eric Lewald and his team, they knew that. He was hired as the showrunner for this series. Before then, he had 7 years writing experience for television, and it was through his connection to an executive, Sidney Iwanter, that Margaret discovered him. Up until this, he had basically no knowledge of X-Men or Marvel Comics at large, and that's where Larry Houston and Will... Oh, man, I am not... I'm not going to pronounce...
It's a French last name, and
how did you say it?
I said... I can't even repeat it now. But when I was talking... when I was talking to Larry Houston, he had to keep correcting me because I kept saying Will's last name wrong. And now I can't remember how it's actually pronounced, but...
Yeah, I can hardly even pronounce it, so we're just going to call him Will. So Larry and Will, they helped a lot with that. They had expertise. And Eric also learned from publicly accessible comics and board games that featured the X-Men at the time. Those games would have character descriptions that would help him quickly become more familiar with them. Otherwise, the world of X-Men, the animated series, was largely formed and pulled from the 20-year run by Chris Claremont and John Byrne of comics.
Yeah.
Mark, one of your key reasons for loving this cartoon, as you said in your book, was actually how accurately the stories of the X-Men were told. So, from this perspective now, I think such a limited understanding of the world that he was operating in, Eric did a most outstanding job. He had just 2 weeks to prepare, and that's preparation of the show Bible, the series Bible, and everything that went into it. What do you make of that?
That is insane. I've never heard of anyone in the industry having to prepare a series for 2 weeks. He must have been, working 12 to 16-hour days every day, drinking a lot of coffee. That is just something. But it's amazing they got it done, and it kind of adds to the legend of this show.
It really does.
the X-Men series had everything working against it, even from the beginning.
It really did.
You know, but yet it became this huge hit, this huge juggernaut.
A juggernaut. I mean, every time we say that, I want to laugh a little bit.
Me too.
Now, scope this out, homies. Batman, though it premiered that same year in 1992, it got an entire year of development before it started surfing the airwaves on the tube with their crew. X-Men had to be prepped in just those 2 weeks, and after that, it had a half a year before it hit television. So it didn't have even an entire year of production at all. It was a half a year for those first 13 episodes, and that first 13 episode arc. Their showrunner, Eric Lewald, was responsible for the series Bible. That was what I just mentioned, a collection of information around about 100 pages, but he didn't actually get that complete, I don't think. In my reading of the book, it was like sort of like a reference to what would become a series Bible, because it didn't even hit the requirements before they had to go into production. So 3 documents were produced in those 2 weeks that the entire series was built on. The series Bible, the pilot episode, so that Night of the Sentinels, that entire like opening, and then 13 episodes, that story arc, and that's where it went back to back, and it went over each in a row. And you kind of already mentioned that you've never heard anything like that before, Mark.
Never. But it sort of tracks. But if you listen to the Best Saturdays of Our Lives interview with Larry Houston, X-Men had a lot of production issues in the beginning. One of the things that Larry mentioned was that the first set of episodes that came over. So like in 1992, while I was writing my newsletter, I had to figure out, in the back of my mind, I said, well, this show must be having production issues.
Okay.
Because why are they only premiering 3 episodes, or a 2-parter, and then separating the 2-parter into 1, 2, and 3 episodes, and then repeating those, and then we don't get new episodes until 1993 in January. And Larry Houston confirmed that Margaret Loesch made them, do the animation over because it came in looking so bad.
Okay.
She got on the phone with.
That's probably what the delay was then.
Yes, that was definitely the delay. And that was one of the questions I wanted to ask Larry, because I'm just like, okay, why am I only seeing like limited episodes in 1992, and you guys are pissing me off because I want to see more episodes.
Well, you got hooked, and now you're like, well, where is the show?
Right.
Where is the cartoon?
Exactly.
I signed up for this.
Exactly. And Batman the Animated Series had its issues too. I read in an interview with Bruce Timm that when they started doing the animation for Batman, a lot of the animators from Tiny Toons came over who had never animated
like an action cartoon.
Exactly. But he said they all worked out and they had to step it up.
Oh.
So everything wasn't peaches and cream there either. But to your point, at least they had more time.
Yeah, I mean, just, maybe a half a year more. Nothing spectacular or anything like that. But
right.
In your 1995 newsletter, you did say, since its dramatic debut during the 1992 through 93 season, X-Men has been consistently well-written, delivering well-rounded characterizations and non-stop action. And I think you're pretty much on par with your thoughts today. The level of quality compared to the development time crunch is just so ultra incredible. That
right.
This.
Go ahead. No, I was gonna say, it was the right team that put that show together. It really was. I mean, it was. The X-Men was supposed to happen, in spite of how the show came together. Margaret Loesch, her passion for the series, Larry Houston, and Eric Lewald. I mean, I I think Eric Lewald not knowing about the X-Men sort of helped too, because he was able to bring in, he can look at the show with fresh eyes.
Yeah.
And I believe that also, helped as well. And, he's a good writer.
Yeah, there were people working on this cartoon who had been waiting years for the opportunity to make something like this happen. Larry being one of them, and Will being another, and Margaret most of all. And at the start of this, for Eric, this was just a job that he was hired to do. But from the beginning, he wanted to accurately represent the comics in the world of the X-Men. The only thing that he and the team did that changed things as he wrote, was bring the X-Men into contact with average humans more often and explore the ways in which they were shunned and hated on by humanity. This was a positive, and I'm sure you'd agree, because it just, like we were saying, that was the emotional drive.
Right, and right. So it made the characters a lot more relatable and down to earth. And, like Batman the Animated Series came out the same year, but there's, as much as I love that series, the great production design and the action and the character design and the wonderful background music and the animation, of course, something about Batman the Animated Series was still sort of untouchable.
Okay.
And whereas I feel that X-Men was a little bit more attainable from a viewing standpoint.
Yeah, I think they had a lot more, I thought I wrote this down, but I'm just going to try to quote it verbatim. The writing style was different. You had X-Men was more relatable in its psychology, and Batman was more, well, its psychology was not, it was not focused on relationships, is what I was trying to say.
Right.
So, like, we had psychological impact on the villains and the different interactions Batman had, his own personal story, and then X-Men was about the relationship psychology, like things between characters, how they were affecting each other emotionally.
Right.
So that's my take.
Yeah, and believe me, they're different series, but it's again, it was like DC versus Marvel one more time. This was the 1992 edition of that battle.
They both impacted the world of superhero cartoons,
right?
Dramatically.
Exactly, and that's when superheroes were allowed to throw punches again, and I was like 100% all for it. And I feel like.
Oh, sorry, that's Jiggy. He's actually reminding me that we have a comment section.
Okay.
And we've got a lot of comments coming in here. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but there's a lot of people here for you. Let's see. Sherry Edgen says, can I ask, what is the title of your book? It sounds like a must-read. We did mention that at the beginning, but go ahead, Mark.
It's called The Best Saturdays of Our Lives, and it chronicles how Saturday morning became a competitive business. And it shows Saturday morning programming from 1966 all the way through the 1990s, with Fox Kids sort of being the highlight towards the end of the book.
Awesome. So you can get that. Where is that available right now?
It's available on my website, thebestsaturdaysofourlives.com or tbsool.com, and you can get a signed copy.
Awesome. I actually do have a signed copy, and it's great. Joe Santini says, almost 1,000 subs. You guys should have 100,000 at least. Wow. Joe, thank you for the compliment, man.
That's cool.
Bro, hit me up on social media, man. Your content is great. Or great. He autocorrects. So thank you so much. Really appreciate that, Joe. Keep it unreal, man. All right, Sherry Edgen says, so do you think that Margaret had to have the reanimation done because her job was on the line, so to speak?
No. According to Larry, they all looked at what was coming over from the overseas animation house, and he said she got on the phone and told them, you guys are going to make this right. It wasn't even about her job at that point. It was about the quality of the series. Margaret Less had worked in animation for a long time, had dealt with overseas animation studios, and whatever they sent over, it just was not up to the standard that they were expecting, and so she wasn't going to, let the studio overseas
No.
get away with sending over crappy looking animation.
No, it just made. I mean, we wouldn't have the show we have today if she didn't actually care about it. Like going into it, that was her whole thing. Was like, this is going to be a high value.
Right.
So like she's not going to produce something that is lower than that. So I'm with you on that one. I think that's the whole reason she did it. Well, thank you bunches for your thoughts, homies. You put the commotion in Cartoon Commotion, so we couldn't have this show without ya. When no executives were listening, Margaret fought to get X-Men on TV. Eric Lewald, who knew practically nothing about comics, crafted the best compatible TV drama he could, alongside his wife Julia Lewald, who was a writer, and producer-director Larry Houston brought his knowledge of the Marvel Universe in to aid in making it as authentic a representation of the comics as he possibly could. From a chaotic rough start to a legendary, timeless classic that connects with everyone who watches it, X-Men the Animated Series truly did defy all expectations. Pun intended. Mark, you've been a most excellent guest as always. Could you remind people where they can find what it is you do before we wrap this episode up?
Yes. Okay. So the Best Saturdays of Our Lives book is available on my website. With the same name, the best Saturdays of Our Lives.com, or the initials of my book, tbsool.com. And you can check out my website, order my book. If you want to listen to my podcast, it's on all Apple listening devices. And
is it on Spotify?
It's on Spotify, and it's on SoundCloud as well.
I listen on Google Podcasts, so I had to ask.
Yes.
There's a variety of platforms, but basically it's everywhere.
It's everywhere. So if you want to listen to that Larry Houston interview, or just stuff that we talk about on our podcast, my podcast will talk about things that are in the book, but also things that are outside of the book as well. So we kind of pull the curtain back on maybe why your favorite show got canceled, or why certain studios were competing, or why networks were competing. Maybe why one executive got stolen away or lured away to work at a competing network. We talk about all those things.
It digs just a little bit deeper.
Right.
That's rad. I love listening to your podcast and hearing all those little. I think the last one you had was actually an interview with Cam Clark.
Yeah, that was from Retro Toy Con last year, at the same convention that Eric Lewald will be at this year. We interviewed there's other episodes that are in the can. We interviewed him. We interviewed another actor from Teenage
Mutant Ninja Turtles.
And we also interviewed the speaking voice for Jem, who was at that convention as well.
Samantha Newark.
Yes, who was awesome and super nice, and everybody was really nice. And so those episodes are actually in the can, and we're hoping to get those out soon.
Right on, man. Thank you bunches, Mark, and thank you to the crew for joining us in this live convo. Homies, we will be back on Saturday the 21st to share our newfound perspectives on X-Men, how things now make a lot more sense than when we were first introduced to the series growing up. And there's going to be a little icon in the top right-hand corner. Friendos, if you like what we do here, we cannot continue to do what we do here if we don't get your support on our Buy Me a Coffee page. And we call it Buy Me a Cookie page because Jiggy loves his cookies. Ain't that right, buddy? So if you have any spare change now and then that you could toss in, we would really appreciate it. That link can be found in the description of anywhere you're watching or listening to our show right now. Jiggy already ate all the cookies that we've gotten so far, so anything you do that you could do to help us would be greatly appreciated. Thank you, bunches. And even if you can't help with money, we appreciate you being here, listening and watching, liking. Every bit helps. Again, don't forget to tune in next Saturday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for our follow up on X-Men the Animated Series. That's Saturday the 21st of October 2023 at 8 p.m. Hang with Jiggy, me, and a whole bunch more X-Men. Until next time, keep it unreal.
Cool.
You want to do like a little sign-off?
Yeah, I like to thank Cade for having me on. I really enjoyed myself, and also want to show off the shirt a little bit.
Right on.
Promotion that I received from Cade. A pretty cool shirt.
That is excellent. It looks great.
Yeah, and this was fun, and I definitely want to come back and discuss more Saturday morning tidbits. So thanks again for the opportunity. It's been a blast as usual, and I'm really looking forward to the next time.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to it too. You are a fountain of cartoon knowledge. It's always a pleasure talking with you, Mark. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
All right, now for real. Keep it unreal.
If you enjoyed the show, the only way it grows is if you share it with a homie, so they can know. Come join the commotion, cartoon commotion. Come join the commotion, yeah, cartoon commotion.
Cookie shoutouts! Eric Grant, Carrie Cube, Legion of Comics, Marcia Sullivan, Sherry Edgett, Kate Utterback, and of course ToySoccer.com. And just so you know, we are brought to you by the fine folks of the Cereal Box Network. CerealBoxNetwork.com. Lay us out, Jiggy.